everybody, welcome back. It's Jennifer J, and this is episode 134. As promised last week, I told you that I was going to do a little synopsis of my story, and I don't know how much I'll get through. I don't know how much detail I'll give you because I only have a short amount of time. But if you haven't watched from the very beginning, you can go up to your toolbar and hit videos, and it'll show you all the videos. And you can start and hear the whole story, and it gives you much more detail. But if you haven't done that and you just want to listen today, that's fine too. Or if you've been listening and you already know the story, this might just be a refresher to remind you of God's goodness and how amazing He actually is. So I hope it will encourage you as you hear what God's done in my life. So I'm going to start back in September of 2021. So God started putting Arizona and the word move in front of me pretty much every day. Every day, these two things were kind of in my face. And over a period of time, through September and October, I'm starting to really notice that they're really in front of me all the time. And so I'm like questioning God and going, are you telling me something with this? And I walk into church one Sunday, and there's a big banner hanging from the ceiling. It's a big red banner with white lettering, and it just said, move. And I said, oh, that's really cute, God. You sent me an actual literal sign. And I don't recommend being snarky with God, but I did that day. I walked down the hall, and they've got these flags. They sit on the floor, but they're like open house flags or whatever, and they said move. They had table coverings that said move. They had booklets, study guide booklets for a Bible study our life groups were going to do. They had postcards on every chair that said move, 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 everywhere I went that morning. Pastor starts his sermon. Pastor Rick at New Life Community Church starts a sermon with, are you ready to move? Those were his words. He was talking about the church was going to move to a different location. We were going to have a building program. He also talked in other sermons about moving out of your pew and into ministry, different things like that. He had a whole campaign, a whole series about moving. He didn't know that God was talking to me about actually physically moving. So as I'm wrestling with this every Sunday with God, and I go home one day and I'm sitting in the car. It's November in Kansas, so it's cold, right? So I don't turn the car off, leave the heater running, but I turn the radio down and I say to God, I say, okay, God, if this is really you telling me to move to Arizona, and I'm not just a crazy person, I know you're not going to send me there without a ministry, so could you at least tell me what that is? And right then on the radio, they announced a man they were going to interview from Phoenix, Arizona, named Gary Webb. And he runs a ministry called OCJ Kids. And they mentor foster kids aging out of the system. I'm a foster mom. I've had 58 foster kids. At the time that I was listening to this, I was a foster mom. I had just moved into my new house. It wasn't a new house, it was a used house, but I just moved in, it was new to me. I just moved in and I'd just gotten my licensing going, right? I was just getting the process done. So that really spoke to me, right? Okay, so the next morning, I get up and I do my Bible study and I do my devotionals and I say my prayers and I do all that on my iPhone. And then I tell God, okay, but if this is really, really you, like I know you did that and that was awesome, but if this is really, really you, I'm already doubting, it's like been 12 hours. I need to see that word move just one more time. So I finish my prayers and I open Facebook on my phone. And typically, Facebook algorithms, you're going to see the people that you're always talking to or liking or commenting on their stuff. But this particular day, I didn't see any of them. I saw someone that I hardly ever see on Facebook. and she's one of the realtor partners I work with. And she said something like, we're not promised tomorrow. What you have to do, move now. So I shut Facebook immediately. I looked up at the ceiling and I said, I hear you loud and clear. And that's when I knew he was calling me to move to Arizona. So I start making some plans. I'm still like in disbelief, but I start making some plans. So December, I decide to go to Albuquerque and see my best friend, Raquel. And while I'm there, I think it was the first day I woke up, I did my Bible study, and it was Advent, so it was about when the angels tell the shepherds to that Jesus has been born, and they make haste and they go find him, right? The application was, what God's told you to do, move now. So I woke her up, I had her read it. She said, wow. I said bye. I packed up my car. Within 30 minutes, you guys, by 7 in the morning, I was on the road to Phoenix. I was driving another 6 hours to Phoenix. And I got to OCJ Kids. I thought I was at the wrong place because when I pulled up, it looked like storage units. It was like garage doors. And there was 4 of them. And I was so confused as to where I had gone. I thought, I'm not at the right place. This is not an office. But when I pulled around to the front, it was an office. So there's 4 storefront windows. They had 3 of them. And I'm knocking on all of them. I'm pulling on all the doors. Nobody's there. They're closed for Christmas. It's 2 days before Christmas at this point. So I get back in the car and I go, okay, God, do you want me to wait? Or that's all the further I got. A car pulls up beside me. It's actually a blue pickup truck. And Gary Webb's wife, Tammy Webb, co-founder of OCJ, gets out, and I ask her if she's with OCJ Kids, and she says, yes, we are, but we're closed. And I said, I know, but God just had me drive 1,200 miles, so I don't know what you've been praying for, but here I am. And she did not have the connection or excitement that I thought she would have. I was like, my knees were water, and like I wanted to fall on the pavement and just worship God or hug her neck or something. She was just like, well, come on in. So I didn't hug her and I didn't fall on the pavement and worship God, but I was giddy. So I go in and she tells me all about the ministry. She told me about all 17 ministries, what they do, how they pack their suitcases, what they give them, how the program works. She showed me everything. She showed me their offices, the library, everything. She spent a lot of time with me. At the end of it, she said, so are you ready to move? So I leave there and I go back to Raquel's. Yes, all the way back to Albuquerque. And we're talking about it. And Raquel's like, you've got to start writing this stuff down. You've got to keep track of it or you're going to forget all the things. So I did. I started writing it all down. New Year's Eve, a friend of mine that lives in Arizona actually called me and said, what time's your church? And I said, we don't have church on New Year's Eve. What are you talking about? And they said, we always have church on New Year's Eve. What are you talking about? And so I said, well, what's your church? And I'll watch it. So I did, and it was very good. So much so, that was on a Friday. On Sunday, I watched their church again. I went to New Life in Kansas, and then I watched their church online. Now, I had been a member of a church in Kansas for 23 years, not New Life, a different church in a different town. And I had done everything at that church. I had a key to the church. I directed VBS. I taught Sunday school. I was on the finance team. I was nursery coordinator. I had done a lot of different things at the church. I'd been in charge of a lot of things, been on a lot of teams, gone on mission trips, all sorts of things. But the pastor crossed the line with me, inviting me into an inappropriate relationship. He was married, I was married, not to each other. It was not appropriate. I left the church. He sent me some threatening emails, threatening what he was going to do if I told. and I printed those out and gave them to the deacons, and they fired him, but I couldn't go back there. I was traumatized. And when they told the church, they were trying to keep my name out of it. So when they told the church, they didn't tell all the details because they were trying to keep my name out of it and trying to protect me. A lot of people got mad. They didn't understand because they loved their pastor and they didn't think he could do anything wrong. And so they thought the deacons were trying to push to get their own way about something, that maybe they had had a disagreement with him and they were just trying to oust him. And other people, you know, it was just a big mess. And so a lot of the church ended up splitting. A lot of the church left. And they all started going to this other church in a neighboring town. Well, not all of them, but many of them started going there. And I was going there. And my oldest son went there, and my grandkids, and like there was a lot of people I knew there. And yet when I went there, I never felt like I was at home. I couldn't wait to get out the door. I would go and I would engage in ministry and prayer and whatever, I went on mission trip with them too. But I couldn't wait to get out of the door, and I didn't realize it at the time. At the time, I thought I just wasn't connecting for some reason. I thought there was some reason people didn't like me. I was really self-conscious. What I realize now is that I was traumatized, and I wasn't willing to trust anybody again. I didn't want to talk to anybody because I didn't trust anybody. And so anyway, when I'm watching this church online, I get this feeling right here, warm feeling. And I start crying and I tell God, how are my people 1,200 miles away? How am I home right now? I feel like I'm home. And it was such a wonderful thing. And I also did some homework on watch night and why the black churches have watch night. So if you don't know about that, Google it, find out, educate yourself. I love it now. I'll go every year. But at any rate, I was home, and so I knew God had given me a church at that point. So now he's told me where to go, and he's told me where to go to church. And I called the pastor of that church. We had a 1-hour conversation, a little over an hour actually. He listened to my whole story. He said he definitely thinks I'm called to be there, and he can't wait to see what I'm going to do there and all that. So I did. I got to Arizona on March the 5th of 22, and I joined the church on March the 6th of 22. So the very next day, I got here on Saturday night. I went to church early Sunday morning and joined the church. But that was New Year's. So my sister that lives in Connecticut actually called me and said that people in Texas they were going to see had COVID, so they weren't going to go. But they were at a Verbo in Arizona, and did I want to come back? So I went back. I spent 11 days with her and her husband and my niece. And during that time, I went back to OCJ Kids. They were open. It was after Christmas now. It was the week after Christmas, after New Year's. And I got to meet all the staff and all that. And still, Tammy and I, we just felt like we were magnets pushing against each other. You know, we weren't connecting. We were like the same polarity, and we were just pushing against each other. So she said we just need to keep praying about it because God obviously sent you here. We just don't know why yet, so we'll just keep praying about it. So, let's see, where do I want to go from there? When my niece was talking to me one night, and we were talking about our relationship. She was just really proud of me for obeying God, and I said, you know, you would do the same thing. And she said, well, God doesn't really talk to me like that. And I said, well, do you talk to him? And she said that she listens to T.D. Jakes. And I had never heard of T.D. Jakes. I apologize, Bishop. I have heard of you now. I love you very much. But I had not heard of him as of January 2022. And so we get home. We'd gone out to get food, and we brought the food back. And she asks her father, or her stepdad, she says, Rod, you listen to a lot of podcasts. Who do you listen to? And he said, well, mostly T.D. Jakes. I'm like, who is this person? So I call Raquel, and I go, have you ever heard of Jake? I didn't know his name. I couldn't say it. Couldn't remember it. And she said, T.D. Jakes? And I said, yeah. Have you ever heard of him? And she goes, yeah, he's a famous pastor. I said, okay. Not heard of him. So I started listening to him. Well, OCJ had made an appointment with me to come back out on Friday to meet with them, and so I went there and met with them and everything, and then when I left there, I thought, you know what I really want to do is go to church. So it was a Friday, but I drove to the church, Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church. I love you all. And I drove there, and I was so excited, you guys. I pulled in the parking lot just like this. I was so excited. And I didn't know where to go. I didn't know it was a big church. I didn't realize from watching online on my cell phone it didn't look that big, but it's huge. And so there was buildings everywhere, and I'm pulling on all the doors, and I'm walking to different buildings. I finally find a door that's open, and Deborah is in there, and she's so kind. And she asked who I wanted to talk to. She said they usually require an appointment, and I said, I don't care, anybody. So Elder Penn came down. I love Elder Penn. She is my favorite. She talked with me, listened to my story, told me her story. They're very similar stories. She gave me some good advice, but when she very first met me, she took me into a room behind Deborah, and there was a credenza with nothing on it, big long credenza, and it had a book on display, When Women Pray by T.D. Jakes. And I said, I need to have that book. And she said that they had a bookstore and I could buy it, and I did, which of course they do, they were huge. But it is a good book. If you haven't read it, it's a really good one to get, and you don't have to be a woman to get it, but it is a really good book. So then I leave there and I'm all excited, right? And I have my new book and I'm so excited. I just heard of him and now he's in my life. And so when I'm with my sister from Connecticut, she said, so are you really moving to Arizona? And I couldn't say it out loud, you guys. I just couldn't speak the words out loud. I couldn't believe it was happening. And so I said, let me go take a walk, and when I come back, I'll tell you. So I go outside and I take a walk, and I've got my earbuds in, right? I got Caleb on, and I tell God, I really need to hear from you. Is this what I'm doing? And the song The Commission by Kane came on. Kane, the band, if any of y'all are watching, you have changed my life. Thank you. I'm gonna cry. If you haven't heard the song, go listen to it. It's called The Commission by Cain, C-A-I-N. That is their last name. Pastor was a little concerned about me because their name was Cain, and I said, it's just their last name. He was concerned about what I was listening to, I think. But anyway, it says, I'll be with you wherever you go. Go tell the world about me. All those sorts of things, and I just knew God was telling me I'm supposed to go. So I go back to my sister's and I say, yes, I'm moving to Arizona. All right, so I'm driving home from that trip. After 11 days, I'm driving home, 1,200 miles, I'm talking to God, there's no radio, it's 2 lanes of just bumper-to-bumper traffic, semis everywhere, no shoulder, desert on either side, no civilization for miles. Hours and hours, no civilization. If you've ever traveled I-40 between Arizona and Kansas, you know what I speak of. But I have no radio, everything's static. So I'm just talking to God, right? And I'm bawling big crocodile tears, ugly cry, telling God, how am I moving to Arizona? I just bought a house. I couldn't afford hardly my mortgage, you guys, but it was cheaper than rent, which is why I purchased, because it was like $400 a month cheaper than my rent. But I have this mortgage I can barely afford. I can't afford rent in Arizona is even higher than Kansas by a lot. I had no family here. Like all my kids and grandkids, all my kids are in Kansas. One's in Hawaii, but all my grandkids are in Kansas. And so I was just like, what is happening right now? And you guys, within 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes, I apologize for the timer. It's telling me that it's time for me to stop. So I might have to do a part 2 next time. But my sister called me, and I guess I'll stop there and give you the cliffhanger. So tune in next time, and I'll tell you what happened on the rest of the drive home. See you next time.